right, welcome everyone to our second installment of our legal series. We have Todd Jarvis here, Strategic Legal Works, PLLC. I'm really excited about this week's episode, mainly because I've been seeing a lot of my friends starting to grow their businesses and hire on people. I know personally we're looking on to onboard a couple people on our team. I have a background in HR and payroll, but it's really great to have a lawyer here to kind of talk about the ins and outs of employee versus independent contractor, things that we should have in place to protect ourselves as the boss. So Todd, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, great. No, I'm glad to be back. I really appreciate this. It was a lot of fun last time. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the last episode, and hopefully we can get just as much good information out this time. Have a good discussion. One thing I thought about as we move into talking about growing your team and growing a team and what that means as far as your legal foundations are concerned, I thought maybe we could talk a little bit about agreements in general, because really when it comes to business and a lot of the things we're going to talk about going forward in this episode and the future sessions that we have and this series that we have listed out, agreement's going to be a big part of it, because business is all about the relationships. And when it comes to successful relationships and having successful relationships, having and understanding the expectations between the parties is key. And how we do that is through agreements. We agree to perform certain expectations for one party, and the party in return sets forth and commits to certain actions that we can expect from them, right? So the more ironed out those expectations are, the more successful a relationship can be. So I just want to talk a little bit about that in general as far as having agreements. Now, we know that a lot of people, when they think about working with an attorney or think about legal agreements and legal contracts, it's like, oh, this stuff's it's just bogging me down. It's trying to hold me back from just running full steam ahead in my business and making money, right? Hopefully we can change the attitude a little bit and little perception of that. And really, agreements can be a perfect opportunity for you to get a little more clarification and a little more clarity in your business and clarity in what's happening and where you're going. It lets you to like I said, iron out what is happening in your vision for your business in relation to this new party you're bringing in, whether it be a vendor or whether it be an employee or a partner, this other person or entity that you're deciding to do business with, and they're going to be a part of this business. The agreements can make sure that is successful, that and that you can have a good vision, that you're basically saying, hey, we're all on the same page. We're all looking to grow together and to move forward and to keep conflict minimized, right? So we know agreements can be both either oral or written. So sometimes, even if you don't have a written agreement, you might have an oral agreement and not even know it.
What would be an example of an oral agreement that you wouldn't know?
Well, I mean, as far as what I mean by that is the other party might have understood something from you that you didn't intend. So when you have an oral agreement, or another party thinks you agreed to something orally, then you don't know that you're both on the same page, that you're all on the same page, right? That's where a written agreement comes in place and where it can be very helpful. Is one, it helps you to both review what you've agreed to and really digest it and clarify it in writing. And so that when you go to put that agreement into action, you're both are going to be implementing the same plan.
So what you're saying is I should start having written agreements with my husband so we're on the same page. Just in general.
It really, not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
All joking aside, I think having written agreements is definitely, it's written down. There's no like, well, I thought you said this or I heard that. it really eliminates the he said, she said kind of deal.
It does. And it can be as easy. And one of the easiest way to do this is after you have a discussion with someone that you're going to move forward with in your business, in whatever role that is, write it down in an email. Be very specific in an email and say, hey, this is what we talked about. This is what I understood we're going to do. And, we're going to move forward with these 3 points. I'm going to do this. You're going to do that. And then send it off. And at the bottom of that email, say, hey, if you agree, just reply and let me know. And send that over. And they can reply and say, no, this is what I meant. And then okay, glad we're having this conversation now and not later. Or they'll come back and say, yeah, I'm on the same page. This is what we're going to do. And there you'll have a written agreement, right? And then if you want to move forward that way and have it more formalized from there, at least you have that to fall back on. So again, it just brings harmony in your business. It brings harmony in the relationships you have with your vendors, with your employees, or with your clients. One of the as we transition here, I think into talking about building your team, the first person you're probably going to have a relationship with in your business when it comes to your team is going to be a partner, if you have partners. Not everybody has partners, but if you do have a partner in your business or more than one partner, you're going to want to make sure you have ironed out your relationship with them. Particularly what you'll see that in, as we talked about last time, we're kind of going to reflect back to what we talked about in the last episode with the business entities, is where you have formed maybe an LLC with your partner. You're going to have what we discussed as an operating agreement. So the operating agreement is going to be basically your agreement with your partner of how you're going to operate the business, what you can expect from each other in certain what if situations, like what if the business needs more money? How are we going to get more money into the business? What if one of us wants out? So you can think about an operating agreement, or if it's a corporation, those bylaws we talked about. Okay, it's the bylaws as an opportunity again for setting down those expectations with the partners. Or you can go back to your analogy with marriage. You think about a prenup, right? A lot of people think that prenups, that's you only write those in consideration of divorce. Well, maybe, but not necessarily. So in business, we have prenups called operating agreements, bylaws, and part of those documents that's really important to have in place is a buy-sell agreement. Now, those could be just terms within your operating agreement. Sometimes they're just right inside the operating agreement. They're not two separate documents, but oftentimes they are separate documents. And the buy-sell agreement basically goes over what if one of us wants out, or what if one of us ends out of the business, right? Whether it's your choice or not, or through death. So if one of the partners dies, what happens? So a buy-sell agreement is a very important thing to have in place with your partners so you can take care of that. So when in the heat of the moment, especially if it's a heated issue, one person's just fed up, they just want out, it's not working out anymore. To make decisions in that moment, it's going to be really difficult. So having made the decision up front when everybody was working well together, at the beginning, when everybody was excited about building the business together, and you put that buy-sell agreement together and the operating agreement together, that's the time to do it. Because later, when things might get heated, no one's going to want to cooperate. So at least you would be able to, in that moment, in the future, when things are maybe going bad and sour between you and one of you wants out, you can just point back to the document and say, hey, we already discussed how we're going to handle this. Now let's just go through the motions and apply our decisions and that we wrote down in our operating agreement or our buy-sell agreement. And another good reason to do that is because sometimes you think about it, like, for instance, one of the things that you put in buy-sell agreements is, how are you going to value the business in case one of you wants out and has to sell? So maybe is there going to be, one person getting an appraisal, or you both getting appraisals, and a third appraiser is going to come in and choose which one does a tiebreaker of which is the best appraisal. So how's the valuation going to happen? It's important to put in there. Um, and then another thing to think about is how are you going to pay for it if it does happen, right? So let's say the valuation, one of your partners wants to get out, and the valuation comes of your business comes back at $500,000. So you got to pay your partner $250,000 for their half of the business. Where's that money going to come from? And if you put together a buy-sell agreement up front, that you're going to think through those things. It's going to force you to think through those things, and you'll have addressed them. Maybe you buy an insurance policy. You can get a key man or buy-sell insurance policy on the, this is in case of death. So if you can have a policy on the life of your partner. So if they pass away, you can buy the business from their kids or their wife or whoever inherits the business according to their estate plan. There's different ways of handling. Maybe you can put in your buy-sell agreement that there's a particular terms of a note, that you can pay off. You've already agreed to the terms of an installment agreement to buy the business from each other if that comes down to it. Anyways, so the purpose here is to think about handling the big what ifs up front. So when they come, you already know there's already a plan in place, right? And that just helps you be a little more comfortable with your partner as far as moving forward and taking risks together, because there's not that big question of, oh my goodness, what happens if something goes bad or something, you start feeling things are going sour. You don't have that stress because you've already answered the question of what's going to happen. So anyways, that kind of takes care of and talks a little bit about the partnership. I don't know if you have any thoughts or questions about partners or how to handle that relationship at all.
Well, I just want to make it clear to the audience, it doesn't always have to end badly either. Maybe a partner down the road gets another opportunity that they just can't pass on, but they can't take that opportunity because they're still in this business, and they might want to leave in that sense. Or it could be you in that situation that, you've either outgrown the company, it's time to move on. And I want everyone to start thinking about it, not in a sense of it being morbid, like the worst is going to happen, but think of it as like an insurance plan that you have in place, and you know exactly what's going to happen if a situation like that were to come up. And I think it's really difficult for a lot of us, even if we're just building their businesses on the side and we're like, this is not even like a 6-figure, 7-figure business yet. So it's hard for us to kind of think of these things in the future. But since we are building businesses and we do want something out of it down the road, it's better to get these in place now and before it's too late, like you said. And it doesn't always have to be a bad situation where there's bad blood. I used to have a partnership and we had an agreement, and I just kind of outgrew the vision of that current business. I wanted to do something else, but we handled everything like we agreed in the very beginning, and we're still very, very good friends right now. And I support her, she supports me. And that's why it's important to have these agreements, because you just never know what's going to happen down the road.
That's a fantastic point. Thanks for bringing that up. And, I recently had a business client who one of the partners, had to move away because they needed to go take care of their aging mother. And so it was all working well. And they're just like, I'm not going to be able to help out in the business anymore because of this and this and this. So they separated, and they already had a plan of how that was going to happen. It went really smoothly. So yeah, it's not all, because of the worst case scenario, but another thing that you mentioned, I think that reinforces the importance of agreements, and it's kind of a good side effect of having agreements in place with teammates, team members, and partners and vendors and clients. There's one thing, as you require these written agreements, people are going to take you more seriously. You're going to take yourself more seriously, and your business is going to flourish because of it. It's a side effect of taking your business seriously, is that it will grow, and you'll be trusted by those vendors and by those clients more fully, because they see you're taking yourself seriously, and you're taking the relationship with them more seriously too. So
yes, definitely agree.
Okay, so team members. So when you start looking at bringing on people, there's a couple ways to do it. You're talking about having employees. You can hire people as independent contractors. And so maybe we can talk a little bit let's talk about the differences there, first of all. So the IRS is the person or the entity that you're concerned about when you're thinking about, am I hiring an independent contractor or am I hiring an employee? Because there are employee taxes, there are self-employment taxes, which I'm sure you're all very well aware of as a business owner. So when you hire an independent contractor versus an employee, really the key comes down to the IRS doesn't really care what you call them. They care about how the relationship acts, right? How are you acting within the relationship with this person? That is how they're going to determine whether the person truly is an independent contractor as you have characterized them, or whether they're an employee. All right. So, and the reason why is because this is so important is because you can become in hot water with the IRS for employment taxes and wage taxes if you do not characterize these people as employees and they are being treated as employees. So the big topic there is an element that the IRS is going to look for is for control. Okay, so they're going to look at how much control do you have over this person and their work that they're doing for you. An independent contractor is someone generally who you don't have much, if any, control over. You're not controlling their schedule. They can work whenever, however they want, as long as they get the work done. You're not controlling how they're doing the work. They can perform the work with whatever methods they need or want or are comfortable with, as long as they're delivering according to the contract you have with them. You're not providing them with their tools or their products or whatever their computers. You're not giving them computers. You're not giving them software. They're providing all of the tools they need to perform the work. So you're not controlling any of that. And you're not really controlling, basically you're not having those employee discussions that you should be having with employees as far as, quarterly reviews and really analyzing their work and controlling how they're performing in their job. Really, an independent contractor, the relationship should feel like, like as if as a homeowner, you hire a plumber to come into your house and fix the plumbing in your house. Okay. That's an independent contractor relationship. And that as much control as you exert over that plumber and how he does his job is relatively what the amount of control you should feel you have over these contractors you are engaging for your business. I hope that was clear at all. But like I said, it's all about control. If you're going to call this person an independent contractor, you need to make sure that they are basically running their own business. You're just paying them to perform a work for you, and they are providing a result and a product at the end that you've hired them for.
I think that's pretty clear. And if you have any questions about this, please drop them in the comments and we'll make sure Todd can answer your questions, or I can in any way, or I would direct him to the question. So don't worry if you're watching this.
Yeah, it is very case by case. And that's why I struggled a little bit there. But it really does come to control. Also, one thing to think about with independent contractors is that, just because someone is virtual, like a virtual assistant or someone who is working virtually, like they're working from home for you, that doesn't automatically mean that they are independent of you. They still might be an employee. So I know that's a
The
lot of
best
times a lot of people will think
example
that.
that I might be able to give is when I used to do bookkeeping. When I was an actual employee, I had to go in at the specific days and times that they wanted me to go in. I had to do all the performances that they wanted. So input all the data, pull out financial reports, and I would go into their place and use their software and everything that they wanted me to use, and I had to do exactly what they wanted to. When I had my own bookkeeping business, all our clients, we would be considered an independent contractor or outside contractor. We used our own software. We had to pay for it, our own insurance, and we would specifically wrap our services on this is exactly what we're going to be providing for you. If you want something more, you can customize your packages. And so they're kind of paying extra. So just kind of keep that in mind versus the difference between like you're pretty much providing all the tools and the direction of what you want versus when you're working with someone on the outside, like independent contractor, you tell them, this is what I need help with. And they, with their own tools and their expertise, come in and help you. I hope that helps.
Yes, very good. And so this is why having an agreement, independent contractor agreement, is so important when it comes to independent contractors. It's so that you can basically make sure they are understanding that your expectation is that they are working independently, that they're not relying on you for any of these tools or control over how they're doing the work. And another thing is, if you do hire someone to do work for hire, make sure to consider their work product and make sure that you, at the end of the engagement, that you own that work product. Okay. Now, for instance, what I mean by that is if you hire someone to maintain your website, for instance, you don't get an employee to do it internally. You contract out for someone, right? To maintain your website for you and to develop that and build it and to maintain it for you. You want to make sure in that agreement you have with them that you own the product they're creating, that website is owned by you because they are independent and they are creating that work and that work is theirs. Without an agreement between you saying that they are going to assign that work to you, the presumption is that they own it. So as you do engage with independent contractors, make sure that if there's anything that they're creating that you want to make sure your business owns in the end of your relationship with them, make sure that is spelled out clearly in your agreements. And then the other way around, if you are a designer, make sure that your agreements are clear, even if you're going to assign and give those logos or the website or whatever it is you're designing for them. Even if in the end you're going to assign those rights to them and give them the ownership of the product, make sure that is contingent upon them having paid you in full. So there's some thoughts on that, on what some things to work into your independent contractor agreements. So now, if you look at this as you look at hiring and building a team, and you are considering how much control you want over this person and the work that they're going to be performing, if you determine that it makes more sense to have them on as an employee and that you're not going to be able to get away with having them as a contractor. Again, a lot of reason, just to emphasize, the reason why people try to get people classified as independent contractor is because it can save you some money. The independent contractor person is their own business, so you are just paying them their fee, and they have to worry about all of their taxes, right? Their self-employment taxes and everything like that. The problem that you can run into if you mischaracterize or classify someone as an independent contractor when they were an employee and the IRS finds out and they didn't end up paying their taxes, you'll be on the hook for those personally, not just your business. The IRS can hold you and assess those wage taxes to your business and to you personally. So a lot of hot water to get in there. That's why it's important to really go through the analysis and determine whether they can be a contractor or you just need to bring them in as an employee and pay the little extra that it does cost to have an employee when it comes to paying taxes and things like that.
Oh, it does.
Okay, so when you're considering bringing on an employee, Obviously, the first couple things you're going to do is you're probably going to start looking for and advertising for an employee to hire, right? So there's some things to think about. First things to be aware of is to make sure that you don't violate any of the labor laws as far as hiring is concerned. Especially, there are certain classes of persons, and you can't discriminate whether you hire them or not based on those classes. So there we're talking about race, religion, status with pregnancy and children, age, things like that, right? So those classifications you can't discriminate against. So don't have any wording in your advertisement for the job that could be construed to being discriminatory towards one of those classes. And then when you're interviewing them, make sure not to ask questions that make it sound like you are discriminating against them according to those classes. Now, a good example that I've actually throughout my, I remember people asking me, and a lot of times this one gets brought up, violated a lot on accident, to be honest, when they're just trying to build a relationship and kind of small talk at the beginning sometimes. But when they talk about, how many, what's your family, you start talking about your family and asking about kids and things like that. It's dangerous. Don't do it. Just don't. Don't ask people how many kids they have.
It seems so innocent, but yeah, I could see that.
And then, so with that, for instance, another reason why it come up is, let's say you're hiring someone who's going to be working from home for you, right? Maybe they're fielding calls for you as an assistant, but they're just going to work out of their house, or maybe they're making sales calls for you or something. Don't ask them, for instance, we need to make sure that it's a quiet environment. How many kids do you have? Are there going to be any kids around, in the background? Just don't. You can still ask and find out the same information by restructuring the question and saying, keeping it to the policies and procedures of the job, saying, hey, this job requires a quiet environment. Are you going to be able to provide that? That's all you need to ask, right? Mm-hmm. They can put it together whether their kids are too noisy or not, if they have them, and things like that, right? So don't, just watch out for that. Let's see here. Just check my notes here a little bit. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, and then from there, when you go to make an offer, I recommend that you present an offer letter. In that offer letter, you're going to talk about basically their expectations as far as their duties on the job, what their pay rate's going to be, and you can talk about as far as hours that they're expected to work. And then a couple things to think about is some people like to do background checks or credit checks on potential hirees. So you want to be careful on how you do that. And this, you're going to want to look at your local laws. There's federal laws about this, but a lot of times states have adopted the federal laws and then made them even more strict, especially California. They have a really strict regulations regarding hiring people and not hiring them according to results of background checks and such, and credit checks. So but in general, things that are generally across the board expected is, one is that you have already made an offer before you do a background check or credit check on them. And that offer is contingent upon them successfully passing the background check and the or credit check. Okay. Now that doesn't mean that just because something weird comes back on their background check or their credit history that you can automatically not hire them. Generally, again, check with the state law, but generally, the reason or the thing that came back on that background check or credit check has to be reasonably related to the job that makes sense.
Yeah.
For instance, whether the person's behind on their mortgage might not be a reason to not hire them for the job that you're considering them. That might not be reasonably related to performance of the job. So that's a little bit about background checks and credit checks. Did you have any run into anything like that, or have any questions specifically that you have experience with your HR or bookkeeping?
No, I was very well trained on what to say and what not to say.
Right.
I would say anybody who is just starting out, who's never managed or even have an HR background when you're going to first hire, you don't necessarily have to get a lawyer, but really do study your local labor laws to the T. I know there are specific laws locally about making sure they're being paid the minimum wage. You'd be surprised how many people don't know that. And stay up to date with local tax and labor laws. And I'm trying to think what else was like a big no-no. And I make sure you look into workers' compensation insurance. I know we're talking about law here, but I believe almost every single state requires that. So that's an extra cost. So you want to have that in place before you have employees, and get all your paperwork done. There's some states that are really strict about having identifying like the I-9s and all that done before they actually start to work with you, like within 3 days. So just be very, very particular with your labor laws, local labor laws, all the paperwork, you have that in place. And that's very different from every state. And even some cities might have added paperwork. So just keep up with that to make sure you protect yourself.
Yes, definitely. Great. And one thing I'd like to add is when it comes to hiring and such, well, the labor laws, make sure to have, written policies and procedures, have a handbook. We'll talk about that more in a second. But one thing that came to mind while you were speaking there about checking labor laws and staying on top of things is I strongly recommend engaging with a payroll service. They just take a lot of stress off your plate. There's so much you can kind of mess up when it comes to employees and it comes to withholding taxes, local, federal, all of that. And so much of it is imputes so much liability on you as a person that it's worth paying $50 a month or whatever it is for most of these services to take care of it all for you. Not only do they take care of all the filings and everything, but a lot of them will actually indemnify you and take on the liability for those issues if something's done wrong. So, I mean, that's, as much liability as you can get off your back, the better, right? So I just highly recommend, research, find a good local or national payroll service that has a good reputation, that's willing to relieve you of that stress and liability. It's just something that's not worth messing up. It can hurt you and it can hurt your employee, and you don't want either of that to happen.
I definitely agree. There's a lot that a business owner can miss on accident. You may not mean to. So yeah, definitely get a payroll expert. A lot of the bookkeepers or tax experts that you might be hiring will have payroll services. So take a look into that.
Definitely. Okay, but the last thing I think about when they're in the hiring process is always check references. Okay. You might think, oh, this person's so nice, or this person's great. I'll be okay. You just don't take the time and the energy it takes to call references, but just always do it. And when you do it, there's a couple things I'd like to touch on here real quick. One is you want to talk to the direct supervisor, right? Don't talk to the HR department necessarily because the HR department, especially if it's a larger company, they won't know the person, the ex-employee very well. Not as well as the direct supervisor will. And so as much as you can, try to talk to a direct supervisor. And a couple things you want to ask. One thing you always want to ask is, is this person eligible for rehire? Would you rehire them if given the chance? So that is the one question that you can get answered. There are things that they're not going to be allowed to tell you about, but to be honest, doesn't mean you can't ask them to see what they're willing to tell you. So, another question that might be good, that doesn't hurt to ask, even though, might be limited on what they can tell you. Unless they don't know what they can't tell you, then they might just go ahead and tell you anyways. Ask, is there anything that I should know about this person before I hire them? Asking that open-ended question really gives them an opportunity to tell you their honest feelings about the person. Now, they might just say, I can't answer that, or I'm not going to answer that. That's fine. They don't have to. But it's not, it doesn't hurt to ask. And a lot of times, but especially in bigger companies, all you're ever going to get out of them is whether they'd rehire them or not. But again, like I said, anything that's important to you, feel free to ask. You're not legally bound from asking questions. They might be legally bound from answering with certain information. So just know that. Now, let's talk about the employee handbook. So you've got the person hired. You've presented them with the offer. I recommend that offer be contingent on a 90-day trial period. That's going to be helpful so that you can kind of figure out if you're going to work together well. And also a lot of times that will keep if you find someone, it takes you a couple tries before you find someone who actually works out for you. You won't have unemployment tax issues. Your insurance won't go up or something because you cycle through a bunch of people that are now asking for unemployment benefits. So look at that, doing the 90-day trial with them. Also have a employee handbook. So the employee handbook is going to be really good because it's going to set down, again, it's basically all of your expectations you have for them and performing their job, right? One thing it's also going to do is it's going to teach them about local laws that you're required to make them aware of. And it's going to help them to know how they can get paid time off, or how their sick pay accrues. You want to make sure that you understand how that accrues, and you want to make sure they understand how it accrues. Again, going back to understanding your local labor laws and wage laws, know what you're required to provide them. Know what kind of sick leave you're required to provide, what kind of minimum wage you're required to provide, what kind of overtime you're required to provide, how many hours a day can they work before they get overtime, or weeks, or is it months? How does the local and federal labor laws in your industry dictate when overtime comes into effect? Because you don't want to get into problems with wage issues, okay? This is a big one. A lot of people want to be the cool boss, right? And they want to just be relaxed and say, hey, just get the work done. We all love each other. We're getting along. We're building this business. You gotta be a boss. You gotta manage these people. It will actually make you a better and more liked employer, because they won't be wondering, what their expectations are. They'll know what the relationship is and how they can get certain things done. When it comes to, for instance, in your handbook, you always want to make sure it says, overtime is only granted upon written permission from your supervisor. Having that in there is going to help you if they have a dispute. Because to be honest, employees is the number one or at least the second most common source of lawsuits and issues within a business.
Wow.
So yeah,
so like it's customers and vendors.
Yes. No. Customers and employees are 1 and 2. So, so always be ready for that. Document everything. Again, your employee handbook is going to document how overtime is approved. It's going to document how and when breaks are done. A lot of states require certain breaks after a certain amount of hours. Some don't. So make sure you know what your state requires. And then also consider in your also, help them understand that there's no privacy expectations with their computers, their email, any of the things that you're providing them with. All of that is there's no privacy expectations, so that they know that, so that when you do go in there, they'll keep things out of there. And then also, let's see here, just rechecking my notes, make sure there's anything more. But when it comes to your employee handbook, that might sound daunting, but to be honest, local attorney should be able to help you with that. A lot of them have, just a generic handbook that you can buy from them, and then they can tailor it here and there for you if you need it. It shouldn't cost a lot to get an employee handbook in place, and it's going to save you a lot of money. If you can set those expectations and have those policies in place, there won't be any argument up in court over what the policy is, because it's there and it's been enforced. So consistency in enforcing those policies and procedures is important as well, and making sure you're documenting any violations of those policies and procedures. For instance, that hourly overtime, getting it approved by a direct supervisor before it can be taken. Make sure if someone doesn't do that they're written up for it. That's documented. This is the stuff that makes owning a business less tasteful, but and less enjoyable. But you need to do it. You need to have those conversations. Review with your employees at least every quarterly on their performance. If not, especially when they're new, maybe every month. Kind of review their performance, and if they're, how they're liking the job, how the relationship's going, and things like that. Review the employee handbook together, see if they have any questions on it. Review make sure you look over the offer letter with them. Another thing about the offer letter, make sure that it is that it does not allow for modifications or amendments without written and signed approval from both parties, so that there's no oral communication where the person says, "Hey, but yeah, 2 months after I was hired, you told me that I got a $2 raise." Say, no, those things have to be in writing, because we agreed in the offer letter that they would be in writing. So that's another thing that'll kind of save you some heartache.
So do both parties have to sign the offer letter? So if I'm hiring someone, I send them an offer letter, do I sign it, or how does that work?
So generally it's in the form of a letter, so you would have signed it anyways. So yeah, it doesn't have to be signed, but it should be signed in both parties, actually. Yeah. And definitely you want it signed by them so you can enforce it. They'll want you to sign it so they can enforce it, right? Mm-hmm. But it should be, normally they're written as actually a letter, so you'll have signed it off anyways. Okay. For in the signature line for the letter. But yeah, you want it signed from both parties, and then make sure that another thing with the policies is on hourly employees, make sure that they're clocking in and clocking out. This is one of those things where, again, you want to be the cool boss, right? And everybody hates logging their hours, but they have to do it, because you need to make sure that those things are documented, because you don't, again, want to get in trouble with wage laws, because that's the presumption is in their favor. If they bring a claim that they earned overtime and you didn't pay them for it, the presumption is going to be that they earned it and you have to pay them for it. You're going to have to prove that they didn't. So make sure that they are recording those and giving you timesheets, and that you're reviewing them and keeping them records of them. And if they refuse to provide them, write them up for it. Keep that record. And anytime you have a discussion with an employee about anything in your office, that document it. Easiest way to document it is after you're done, turn to your computer, maybe if you have a discussion in your office, they walk out, you immediately turn to your computer, write up an email to them talking about, this is what we had a conversation about, this is what started the conversation, and this is the results, this is what the outcome is and what we've agreed to do about it, or this is what's happening due to the conversation, and send it over to them, and then print it out, put it in their file. So you've documented it in their file. 2, you have proof that that the communication happened between you and them, and that they received the communication, and that and you also give them an opportunity, and in that case, to read how you interpret the conversation, and they could either correct or try to get more clarification, because if they misunderstood or understood the conversation differently, you have created that moment to have that. You've given them the opportunity to rebut that and say, no, this is what we discussed and this is how the outcome is. So again, it's all to cover yourself in a way, but in order for those actions, those records to be supportive of an argument against or presentable in court, you need to make sure that it's something that you do on a regular basis, that you can prove that I made this record because it's my policy and procedure to make this record, not just because I thought something was going bad and this person was going to start suing me, so I started making a record. Do it for all the employees, do it for everybody in every instance, stay regular, stay consistent, and that'll be the best argument you have.
And I definitely agree with that. So track everything. I know everyone hates paperwork, but if you have everything up front, it should eliminate the paperwork. But have all that documented, and like he said, the easiest way is to send an email, then you have a digital copy of everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, email's great because it's easy to use, it's quick, and it creates a history. And again, you have electronic copy, print it out, put it in the paper, your paper file. You got a hard copy now. It's time stamped and everything. And then I think one last thing I wanted to make sure we touched on is just a minute. I had it and now I've lost it, but I will refresh my memory here. Oh yeah. So when it comes to having employees, one thing to live by is that you hire slowly and fire quickly. So just make sure that you take your time really identifying the person that you want to bring into your business. That offer letter, again, something I mentioned before, but make sure that it's at will employment so that you can fire them anytime for whatever reason. But then document the heck out of the relationship so that if something happens, you've got support showing why you fired them. And don't waste your time waiting to fire someone who needs to be fired. Just get it done. One thing is that they're ready to move on because they're not performing well. They don't like it there. You're not getting results you need, and you're paying money to someone who, or think about it this way. I mean, you're taking money away from the right person for the job, right? You have an obligation and you want to support someone who is supporting you in your business. So get the right person in place and feel good that you're paying them for it rather than the person that you tried to get to work on it for months. Just don't drag it out.
Yeah, if I can add to that, they just end up being a cancer in your company culture, in your company. So fire quickly. I mean, it's one thing giving someone a chance to correct their mistakes, but if that doesn't change, then you need to let that person go.
Exactly. That's what the documentation is about. You say, hey, you know what? This happened. We need to fix this. Give you another chance. Let's get on the same page. Hey, we're both on the same page. Okay, let's move forward. Hey, and then it happens again. Nothing gets fixed. Bring him, say, I'm sorry, it's not going to work out. Just be done. Also with that, with the documentation, it's always good to have a witness. So in exit interviews or anytime you're going to fire someone, have someone else present, whether it be another manager or their supervisor, or maybe be realistic. Most of our small business owners, and this might be the only person that works with us, bring your partner in, have them sit with you while you have this conversation. So just so that someone else is there documenting the conversation and can witness what happened. And yeah, I think that's a key point there. Any experiences you had that you think might be helpful anecdotally with hiring and firing?
I think I've shared some of those.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head without like a question to prompt it.
Yeah.
The only question I had is, I definitely recommend having someone if you are going to let someone go, but what if they are the solopreneurs? So let's say it's just them, they don't have any partners, and they need to let go of their first and only hire. So who would they get to be like a witness?
That's a good question. Now, one thing is, I mean, you could have a business partner, as far as not necessarily that. Maybe you have a bookkeeper that you work with. That person would already have been in contact with this other person, and you can have them there with you. They're going to need to know and document it anyway, so they can make sure that everything's taken care of on the books. And you're not violating anybody's rights by having that person there. In most cases, I can't think of anything. I mean, you could get attorney to tell you that or not, but I think, like I said, you should, as we might discuss in future episodes, having a bookkeeper is imperative anyways. And then especially someone, if a lot of time bookkeepers will have HR experience with employment issues. So hopefully you've kind of engaged them to help you with that anyway. So it would be natural to have that person there in the conversation, that exit interview. So.
Awesome. Well, I don't have anything else. Do you want to summarize or add anything to what you had said today?
Just again, relationships are all about expectations, and take your business seriously, and others will. And one way that you can demonstrate that you're really being serious about these things is to document your agreements, and make sure you have written expectations. And again, if you think that agreements are holding you back, change your attitude. Look at them as a way to express the vision that you have of your relationship with this person, and how it's going to grow your business, and how you're both going to flourish because of the relationship. Because really that's what agreements do allow to have happen. So, and if you ever have any questions, of course, it's always, I always recommend, reach out to a local attorney if you have any questions. The last thing you want to do, follow those gut instincts as far as when you're talking with someone, working with someone, and you guys come to a handshake agreement, and and it just doesn't feel right. Like you feel like there's gaps, or there's something that just doesn't, that you're not clear on. Don't just let it go. Bring it up with the person. Send that email off saying, "Hey, this is what I understand from what we talked about. Is this what you understand? Is this how you understand it?" You don't want to be flying by the seat of your pants when it comes to your business, or moving forward when there's doubts. You might think it's holding you up in the present, but you're going to be so much better off in the future if you take the time to really iron out your vision and iron out those questions and those doubts. So, yeah.
Thank you, Todd, again for today's segment. Again, this is all educational purposes. We want to make sure you understand what you need up front, and always consult a professional. So again, talk to your bookkeeper. They're most likely trained in payroll and all the HR. Talk to your lawyer. Get these things in place to protect yourself. And I know a lot of you are like, "Well, Tina, I don't have the money for it." Well, I'm just going to say, from someone who's been on both sides, who worked in management corporations and a business owner, you can't afford not to. So find a way. There's always plenty of resources out there. And check locally. Sometimes they have pro bono law offices. I know they have one here in Tucson. Get the help that you need so you're put into a good place, so all your hard work doesn't go out the window. Again, this segment is every other week. Part 3 will be coming out in 2 weeks. So stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel so you are first to be notified of the new episode and all other episodes. We'll make sure to put Todd's information down here in the description. And if you need any more help or have any questions about bookkeeping or HR, book a consultation call with me, or if you need any more help with law or anything specific for you and your business, we will have a consultation call link for Todd as well. And I'm going to sign off and thank you for spending your time in this afternoon with us today.
Thank you.